everybody, in this video we're talking Marvel Snap. It's our first deck video and we're going to be starting with starter decks. So we're going to check this bad boy out. We are going to do a quick sort of 1-minute description of what this is, about how to read this graphic, what's where, and just to make any sense of it. If you don't need that, then skip forward about 1 minute. All right, let's jump into it. Quick explanation for the WolverSNAP deck graphics. We've got 3 different sections. The bottom left, you will see the name, the version along with the date, some promo, a specific type of deck, whether it's a starter, maybe an archetype, etc. Probably the most important section, the legend, where we got 4 different colors classifying the different cards, where we've got red for foundation, which means that is the key card or cards in this deck. Orange for critical. Those are the next most important cards. We've got yellow for impact, which are not quite critical, but still very impactful. And then last but not least, we've got green, which are flex cards, meaning you can have a different card in place of that. Those cards are specifically shown in this bottom right section, and they are highlighted with a big green box. The top section shows the entire deck, and every card in this top section is going to have a color highlight behind it indicating what type of card it is, whether it's a foundation, critical, impact, or flex. So when you see red behind a card, that means it is a foundation card. When you see an orange behind a card, that means it's critical. If it's yellow, it's impact. Green means flex, and again, that ties down to the bottom section. Every card has its abilities shown over it, and in the rare circumstance where you might have a foundation card that could have another foundation card filled in for it, we've got a little light green border around that one, and then in the flexible section in the bottom, we've got a red border around that so that you know those two might be able to be swapped for each other. Like that explanation just said, we've got our foundations, our critical cards, impacts, and our flexible cards. So we're going to start. This deck is an aggro deck. It's a starter deck. Early on, these are all cards that beginning players are looking to have. If you are not a beginning player, I would love to still hear from you and tell me what you think about what's in here, things that you might have changed, etc. So we can maybe do different versions of this. But getting to the deck. So we've got Kazar, Blue Marvel, and a third foundation position. The switch here is between Onslaught and potentially Bishop. Onslaught doubles down on the ongoing. The risk of having Onslaught here, and the reason that we list it as a flex option, is because you will have your Kazar and Blue Marvel in one location, as well as potentially the Onslaught. So if somebody saves their Enchantress, you risk a lot of potential lost power with just one fairly cheap counter. That is the reason why we list Bishop here as an alternate, because Kazar and Blue Marvel are all about focusing and building your power of your other cards, specifically 1-cost cards with Kazar, which you can see in this particular deck. There's 2 in the criticals and there's 2 in the impacts. We have 1 in the flex, and you can bring more into the deck if you want to ditch something like Sentinel and lean really heavily into Kazar. But remember, you do have Squirrel Girl, which puts additional 1 energy cost cards on the board. When you're looking at these foundation cards, you are leaning into the Kazar Blue Marvel buffing of additional cards. So you might want to spread those out. If you are somebody who does not like to take those risks all in being one lane, then you're going to switch over to the Bishop, bring Bishop in for Onslaught. And Bishop's all about making sure you get him out there on that 3rd turn. If you get him out there after that 3rd turn, he does lose a lot of power. You certainly can get some points from him, but it is not going to be as high unless you're just dropping a lot of low-cost cards on turn 5 and 6, which typically you need for your Kazar and your Blue Marvel or your Onslaught. So that's where you're looking at the foundation cards and trying to decide sort of what to build around. When you first get your hand in your matchup, you're going to want to look and see what you've got. Ideally, you would have 1 of these 4 or 2 of these 4 cards so that you can start planning around how you're going to build this. If you want to go towards like the Bishop route or spread out Kazar, Blue Marvel, if you've gone with all 3 of these, or stack them up if you do have all 3 of these and go, okay, I need to make sure that I save 1 lane for these 3 cards. But again, remember, you're putting yourself at risk. So you've got the power increases from the Kazar and the Blue Marvel, and then potentially doubling that. Or like I mentioned, you've got the Bishop that's going to add 1 point for every card that you play. The next group of cards are what we're calling critical. And in this one, we've got Ant-Man, Squirrel Girl, and Angela. Angela is a card that I know for me personally started to see a lot more value as I got more and more into the game. When I first started, I didn't think Angela was that great, and boy, was I wrong. I think that Angela is a really solid card that you can drop things on. The one thing you want to make sure of though is if you're playing an Angela, you want to play your Squirrel Girl on top of your Angela, because when you have a Squirrel Girl and it drops a squirrel on the Angela, Angela will not get those 2 points. You actually have to play the card on Angela to get those 2 points. Then you've got a card like Ant-Man, who, if you fill up that specific location, will get an additional 3 points. That is a nice, powerful boost for a 1-cost card to get 4 total power. Again, you've got to make sure that you're spreading this out in case you get Enchantress anywhere, because if you have all of these all in one spot, you do lose all of that power with just 1 Enchantress. But you get some decent bang for the buck with these 3 cards, especially with Squirrel Girl, who is going to put 2 more squirrels on different locations. So that way, when you drop your Kazar, your Blue Marvel, you've got essentially a 1/3 card there, meaning you, for 1 energy, you've essentially got 3 power. The 3 power is just spread throughout the locations. Next up, we have our impact cards. And here we've got Nightcrawler, Elektra, Iron Man, and Mr. Fantastic. They all are important for different reasons. You could arguably switch these out, but we wanted to list them as impact because we do think they can be pretty pivotal, especially in that early game. We really like Nightcrawler 1 because he's a 1 cost, but the thing that's great about him is you can reach those Death Domains, those Sanctum Santorums, those Luke's Bars, any of those locations that you can't play on and you have to move. Nightcrawler is a fantastic addition for those type of items, and he's going to get extra power from somebody like Kazar and Blue Marvel. And when you're a starter deck, you're not going to run into characters like Doom or Vision, something along those lines, or Ultron, that you're very unlikely to see those cards. So a Nightcrawler is really the best sort of move card as far as hitting those locations when you're not playing a pure move deck. One additional thing to add on Nightcrawler is it's really good, if you can, is to play him on Angela, because playing him on Angela gets her those 2 points, and then you can move him later. So that means you free up a spot for playing not just 2 or 3 cards on Angela, but a 4th card if you play Nightcrawler, because you move them off and those 2 points stay with Angela. Elektra is one of the, I'd say, at least when I played, the highest used 1-cost card early on, especially to counter what you'll see a lot of is those sunspots. On reveal, she destroys a random enemy 1-cost card at a location. Now, there is RNG there, so you want to use her wisely. I recommend taking out either that Sunspot if you see him, or even an Ant-Man, or shoot, even a Nightcrawler. But remember, you risk that Nightcrawler moving before that Elektra actually throws her Psy at him. So if you bring her and drop her down on that Nightcrawler lane and they moved it first, there goes your Elektra. And then we've got Iron Man. Iron Man is generally just a great strong card. Now, it is 5 cost and 0 power, so it needs to be played wisely. Early on, you will find that you might struggle using him a little bit, just because you are really focused in on trying to get that Blue Marvel on turn 5 or 6, or getting a bunch of cards out there. So while Iron Man is not a flex card technically, if you're struggling to use him and you want to bring in more lower cost cards, or shoot, you even want to bring Bishop in here instead of Iron Man, that is definitely not a bad play, but he is a strong, good impact card at this stage of the game. Mr. Fantastic is a great card early on. Again, he gets you to reach those hard to reach locations, just like Nightcrawler. I like typically playing him middle so that you can make sure you get the 2 power on each side. And that's something that your opponent's going to have to factor in for the rest of the game. And again, if for some reason he's doubled up with Kazar, Blue Marvel, and Onslaught, then this gets doubled and you get +4 on each side. But remember, you do risk getting nuked by that terrible, horrible Enchantress. Now, also, if you do have that as well, this is turn 3, Kazar's 4, Blue Marvel's 5, Onslaught 6. So the only way you can even pull off that sequence is if turn 1, you use something like Squirrel Girl to get a bunch of stuff out there, and turn 2, you're using 2 more 1-cost cards. So I would be very wary of just planning on getting 3, 4, 5, 6 in something like this. It does get to be where you're looking at cards like Mr. Fantastic that you might want to shift around a little bit. That's your play. Now, and I will also say, don't just plan on one specific sequence with any deck that you have, whether it's this one or another one. You want to give yourself multiple win conditions. And then we've got Sentinel. And in Sentinel, he's a flex card, as is Korg. These are the type of cards where Sentinel just gives you additional cheap cards to play in your hand. I think that this is a decent card to have. I think he is fantastic as far as keeping your hand full and playing cards that you know you can put on the field. Talking Sentinel, he's just a nice card to have so that you can make sure that you've got relatively cheap cards in your hand to play later if need be. If for some reason you're just jammed with Kazar, Blue Marvel, Onslaught, Iron Man, and Mr. Fantastic in your hand, and you're not getting any of these ones, then you can play with your Sentinel. You keep getting the Sentinel laid down, you get another one in your hand that you can play later in the game if need be, and just keep bringing them back to your hand. And then Korg, who shuffles a rock into your opponent's deck. He's just sort of a troll card, cheap. If you want to try to mess with your opponent a little bit, this is definitely one of the more flexible options here. And as far as the cards that you would want to bring in to replace either the flexes or potentially any of these maybe impact type cards that you're not really feeling. Again, we talked about Bishop replacing Onslaught. Iceman, on reveal, Iceman gives in a random card in your opponent's hand +1 cost. Obviously that maxes out at 6. He's just a great sort of troll card that messes with your opponent. It can really change the way they play their hand. Scorpion, similar but slightly different. On reveal, afflicts cards in your opponent's hand with -1 power, meaning that if it is 2 power, then it'll take 1 off that, being 1 instead of 2 power. Rocket Raccoon. Now, this is a little bit more risky, but it's a 1-cost card. On reveal, if your opponent played a card here this turn, it's +2 power, so you get a 1/4. So anytime you know your opponent is going to play at a specific location, you can drop Rocket Raccoon. Now, I will say early on for starters, a lot of times everybody plays on that far left lane the first turn. So if you got Rocket Raccoon and you want to drop it there, it's a decent chance at getting 4 immediate points. Now, eventually people stop doing that, but something to think about. Another flex option here, in case you're feeling like, you know what, I need to protect my 1-cost cards. I've got a lot of them in one specific lane. I want to make sure that they are never destroyed by Killmonger, who will be one of the bigger, besides Enchantress, counters to this deck. Armor helps protect those 1-cost cards. Really, he protects everything in a lane. So armor, any cards at that location cannot be destroyed. Killmonger specifically kills all 1-cost cards. So this armor helps protect against anything like that. If you do experience it, it might come across at some point when you're playing this deck. So this is the general aggro deck. This is something that you'll see on a lot of the sites. Again, we gave a little bit of a different twist to some of these just so that you could see. And I wanted to walk through what the deck could do, why you'd be using certain cards, and make sure that people understood like what were the foundation pieces, what were the parts that were maybe more critical, you know, the impactful cards, and then what is a specific flex option. So I hope that this has been helpful to you. Again, if you are a more experienced player and you've got some thoughts about this deck to help out any of those starter folks, please do comment below. Come to the Discord, which is in the description below. We'd love to hear from you guys. And until next time, we hope you have a wonderful day.